The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and does not represent legal or accounting advice or counsel and should not be seen as such. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. We make no promises or assertions on how this information will impact your business, your personal life, or financial well-being. The information relayed does not imply endorsement or offer opposition to any specific organization, product, or services. Welcome to Shift. I'm your host, Lori Power, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. It is my pleasure to have my friend, my colleague, and my main collaborator, Lissa Daub, join me today. And what we're going to be talking about when it comes to succession and exit planning and building value within your company is understanding the difference between what is a center of influence and what is an expert service provider, and how working with a value builder can pull those together for effective collaboration, which is then going to create more value within your company as you move through that transition process. Can you take a moment, Lissa, introduce yourself, introduce the Strong Impact Academy, and what you do, what you love to do?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me, Lori. It's great to be here as always. So yes, my name is Lissa Daub. I own the Strong Impact Academy. And basically, I come at this from a bit of a different perspective. My background is I'm a chartered professional in human resources. So I come at it a little bit from the people perspective. I, was helping family business transition a little bit, and I was looking for a way to almost just, get some credentials with that. And I took my certified exit planning advisor and fell in love with the value acceleration methodology. It makes so much sense to me for business owners. And the whole thing that exit planning is not a plan, it's a strategy, and it's a strategy that should start right away. So I'm on a mission to educate as many business owners as I can about this, that, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. Same as with your exit strategy, right? The best time was the day after you started your business, but let's start now. I think one of the big things, again, is I come at it from that people perspective. And they, reducing owner dependence and different things like that, that help increase the value of the company. But I can't be all things to all people. And so our whole conversation today about collaboration is, I'm so excited for this.
Well, and no business is an island, are they? And
Exactly.
it's interesting when you say when to plant a tree, just to digress on that a little bit, is, we heard it as we start our businesses, don't get into business unless you know how to get out. But
Yes,
somewhere within the tornado that creates a business and getting through those first 5 years, the next 10 years until you can start to scale, you forget about that adage that said, don't get in unless you know how to get out. And now you've made it through the storm. And now I can't remember how I planned to get out, you know? And
exactly.
this is where that collaboration is really necessary. We're really good at what we do, but we're not good at what we don't do. And it's important, and it flies in the face a little bit of being an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur wants to be able to innovate and move forward and do these things independently, make them strong, right? So it is a bit of a mindset. I'd like to start our conversation really with understanding that mindset and making the difference between what is an expert service provider and what is a center of influence, because those two things come into play when we're building our business and when we're creating that value.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, right, I think it's so easy for business owners to be caught in the weeds. And I know I work with a lot of trades and service-based business where they were just really great at what they did, right? They almost were that master of their craft, and then was like, I could do this better. I don't need a boss. And then ventured off into their own. So it almost is like they became that accidental entrepreneur or that accidental business owner because things went really well. And then they needed to hire people, and now they're a business owner. And I think it comes down to that we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's where the centers of influence are very, very important. And then for us as advisors, having our own centers of influence, because again, we can't be all things to all people, is super important. Now, we also need those expert service providers, and we'll get into what the difference of that is. I'd love for you to talk about the center of influence and, and your take on it.
My take is that the expert service providers are what we need in business, just as we need as a human being to eat. We need liquids. We need a roof over our head. We need to be kept safe. Well, in business, that's the same thing. An expert service provider are those experts we need to be able to do business. So we need banking, we need lawyers, we need accountants, we need bookkeepers, whether that's in-house or outsourced. Today we need IT, regardless of what we do. Even IT companies will outsource IT certain needs. And so those are what we call expert service providers. Those, in my mind, are not your centers of influence. Those are not the people that you go to for that innovative forward thinking by and large. And that's not to say that those people aren't innovative and forward thinking, but by and large, by the nature of what they do, they're concentrated on that expertise and very specific to what they do. A center of influence, though, is somebody who understands the greater needs of a business and can connect you. When I was in journalism, one of the things that we said all the time was, who has your story? Okay. It could be that I was looking at a story about the mayor, but the mayor didn't have the story, right? The chief financial officer had the story. Who has your story? A center of influence is who has your business, number one,
Mhm.
and are they willing to collaborate with you to grow business mutually? And I think that's really where that center of influence just dovetails right into collaboration. And that's where people like you and I come into play, is to say we deal with many businesses with their many needs. Therefore, if they have a particular need, in all likelihood, we know somebody that they can like and trust to do that job for them. And not only that, but is looking out for their best interest and saying, oh, and by the way, you may need to know so and so because I see that you're scaling up or you're building value. And that's my take on the difference between those two.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. And I think we can look at, almost to even simplify it, those expert service providers are almost more transactional, right? You're not going to necessarily meet with your lawyer every other week to talk about the strategy of your business. You're going to reach out to your lawyer when you need contracts reviewed or contracts drawn up or different things are happening within your business. So I think that, as a value advisor, I still want my bank of, I want to know those people. I want to know the best expert service providers that there are out there, because although my clients will have some, they might not be the right ones, right?
Had a really
So
good example of that, right? You had an example where you're talking to the business owner, you're looking at building value. Tell me a little more about that.
yeah, so working with one of my clients, and we had gone through just kind of starting out building that roadmap for him and where he wanted to take his business. So there were certain things that he needed. So I always start with asking who's already on your team, right? Because I want to know. And if I don't know who's on your team, I might want to meet them. So we start with, of course, the accountant, right? The accountant seems to be kind of that number one people that business owners will go to for advice. But also everybody knows when they start a business, at some point, they're going to need an accountant to do their taxes or whatever it happens to be. So I started out by saying, so do you have an accountant? Yes, I have a great accountant. Okay, tell me about how your accountant has advised you on tax strategies and whether you should be paying yourself through payroll or dividends, or what are the conversations you've had with your accountant. And it was like, oh, I've never had those conversations with my accountant. Okay, well, your accountant should be an advisor So are you okay if I make an introduction to the accountant that I like to refer to, right? And so I made that introduction, and then the client comes back and says, oh my gosh, that was amazing, right? I didn't know that an accountant could be like that, right? So, so that's one example again where business owners don't necessarily know. So by me learning to ask the right questions is it's very helpful. So it's the same thing with my list of preferred partners. So it's talking about, okay, so you're starting to build a staff. Have you thought about benefits? And it's like, yeah, I'm just going to go over here and I'm just going to do a health spending account. And it's like, okay, but maybe that's not the best way. Right. And it's like, and I'm, just from coming from the HR world, I'm fairly well versed in the benefits world, but I am never going to tell an owner how they need to build a plan or what their best course of action is. It's going to be, okay, let's bring my friend Lori in. She's my trusted partner when it comes to benefit packages. And let's look at what the best thing is. And maybe it is a house spending account, but let's get all the information first.
I like the way that you put that, not just because you had mentioned benefits, although I will say I love that you did mention benefits, but we don't want to come across, and I know you had no intention of doing that, neither did I. We're not dissing the expert service providers. They
No.
they do what they do and they do it really well. It's the nature, in my opinion, of how they're trained. They're trained rear window. Remember, we're filing taxes between March and April on the previous year. It's always backward looking. That
Yes.
is the nature of the job. And they do it so incredibly well. And they're so busy and they get the job done. And a good accountant is going to keep you safe from that audit, right? No business owner wants that audit. And if you do have an audit, you want that kind of accountant working for you for sure. But
Yes.
what we're talking about is being able to also connect people with, excuse me, those centers of influence that are also going to not just look rear window, but look through the windshield and say, what do I see coming down the path for you based on what we've already taken care of, tax, planning, succession, going forward into work. And I think that's really important. The other thing to note that I know you do, but you didn't mention it, so I want to say it, is we don't want to waste the business owner's time. Time is money. Time takes them away from their business. If they're not focused in, time often will stall or put a full stop to that transition or value building. Somebody like you who can pull everybody together at one time to have that conversation that's in the owner's best interest saves the owner from going to the accountant, writing down the notes and their interpretation of the notes, taking it back, going to the lawyer, taking that interpretation of the lawyer contradicts a lot of things, come back. Now I'm going to go back to the accountant again. I'm going to try to get some clarity. I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to go to an M&A advisor, right? I'm going to see what they can make of that. And all of this costs the business time, energy, and effort, and sometimes will kill that transaction. But somebody like you who's going to pull them all together, that's where we can get that real collaboration happening.
Oh, 100%. And I think, and it's not that it's not that they want to contradict each other. It's just that, again, if you think about, they're the experts in their field, right? So they're going to come at it with their, the accountant lenses, the financial advisor lenses, the lawyer lenses on. And so they're saying what they know. And then also what I'm finding with the business owner is that they're not that expert in any of those fields. So they're like, and they don't want to say, I don't know what you're talking about. Right. So I think by pulling them all in together and even having, that power team meeting. So it's like, hey, what's happening here? Let's pull everybody in together and have a meeting. And maybe I'll pull everybody in together and have a meeting without the business owner. And
Yeah.
we'll have that conversation about what is the best thing that we could do for this business owner and what support do they need and who's the person that's here to offer that support. And then we bring the business owner in because they're busy. The other thing we can forget as advisors is that it's very emotional. You start to think about selling your business, that's your baby. And, people are coming in and saying it's not worth what you think it might be worth, or, all of this is wrong, right? So we have to be very careful about that. So it's about even, I have partners on my team that I even bring in to help the owner deal with that emotional side of it. And what happens when you're no longer own your business, right? What are you going to do? So it's again, it's that the three legs of the stool, right? It's that business readiness, owner readiness, and financial readiness. But I think, again, so often we see in referral partnerships, it's that hot potato.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, Lori, I have a great connection for you. Poof, here you go, hot potato. And the business owner just gets this, here's a business card, or here's an email introduction to my preferred whoever. And they're just inundated with all of this while they're still trying to run their business, while they're still trying to wrap their head around, do I even want to exit? They start to have meetings with all these different service providers, and then it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. Let's just do an asset sale and just be done with this, because now I'm frustrated.
Yeah. And you
So
need to have that person in the room, and this is often overlooked, that just as you had said, there's a family behind that business owner as
yeah,
well. It's
yes,
very emotional because that business owner might be in one of those meetings, they may not be in one of those meetings, but it's really important that we say there's a human, and then there are other humans that are going to impact. I know right away that if I'm going to go through that, I might be the face talking to these expert service providers and laying it out on what I want to do to the business. I may go home and my spouse say something altogether and go, well, if that's what you're planning to do, I'm not into that. So that's really important when somebody like you can pull people together in one room so that you can remind them of the human. So now the conversation with the accountant, it's directly to the lawyer, is directly including the taxation, is directly including the value, and always remembering that human. That to me, that's that collaboration
yes,
where
100%.
magic happens.
Yeah. And that's where we want to find those centers of influence that have the same values as us, that are focused on the same things as us. I'm not interested in spending time building a relationship with somebody that could be a center of influence that is all about, I just want the client, I just want the client, I just want the client, I just want to, I got into this business to make money. Well, it's a byproduct of why we all got into business, right? We all want to make money, we all have to make money, that's a given. But what's that other deeper driving force? And for me, right, it's, my story is that watching my mom and dad, blood, sweat, and tears for almost 30 years, exit out of two businesses and look at each other and say, well, at least we don't owe anybody anything. Oh my gosh, no, right? People deserve a better return on their investment of their time and their money and their years. So I get a little passionate about that.
Well, and you should though, because that's the driving force behind what you do and why you do it so well.
Yes, and
Is
it's right. And
have you bought a business, but really all you did was buy a job? And
yes,
at the end, if you haven't planted that tree, then all you've done is retire from that job and you don't even get the watch.
you don't even get the watch. And then the other thing, my mom is in her 80s now, and we had a conversation last year, and we were just talking about, they didn't have a lot of money in investments and stuff like that. But she gets hardly any CPP because of poor financial advice that they received many, many years ago when they were running their business. Right. So it's like, now it's, instead of like really enjoying retirement, it's watching every penny, because there's not a lot of pennies coming in.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, it's so sad, because that's not the way that it should be. So, and I feel like I'm just on a mission to educate business owners. And I can't do that on my own, because again, I don't know all the things, right? I'm not that expert in the legal things. I'm not that expert in the accounting piece of it. So that's why I build that team to bring in that have the same values. That's like, yes, let's take care of this business owner. Like, this is why we're here, why we do what we do.
The collaborator is the quarterback,
Yeah.
what you're doing. And I'm glad that you mentioned the financial advisor, because the financial advisor is one of those cogs in that machine that are so necessary and sometimes overlooked unless you're working with somebody like yourself, because it's not enough to have the lawyer and the accountant in the room if you don't have that financial planner who can take both of those things and drive it forward
Yes.
for that next, and to say, okay, if they do this, what does it look like in 20 years? If they do this, what does that look like in 20 years? And taking it all together and you pulling those people together. I want to dovetail a little bit into bluntness. And the reason I want to dovetail into bluntness is because I think we do need a bit of bluntness when we're talking about the difference between centers of influence, expert service providers, and where we can be collaborators. And because we have decades of experience of what we might call sharks or referral predators, which is just like you say, there's somebody looking at that hot potato. And people will put themselves out there and say, you know, I am a center of influence. Okay, well, the blunt question is, how are you a center of influence? Right? Are you, if you're going to look at, are you a center of influence and can you be a collaborator on a business owner's team, which is really where we all want to be? We just finished the Olympics. That's exactly what we want. That's the gold medal. Can we be on that business owner's team? If we look at what we do, regardless of the occupation that we do, are we worth knowing? Okay, we may say everybody is worth knowing. Are you worth knowing to that business owner? If you're worth knowing, why are you worth knowing? What are you bringing to the table? And what are your expectations on a go forward basis? Because just as you say, if it's a hot potato and all they're looking at is the money moving out of it, I'm sorry, I'm not necessarily going to say that the business owner is going to say you're worth knowing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it comes down to, I don't have, and I don't want one preferred accountant, one preferred financial advisor. I need a team of people because again, just like I'm not for everyone, you're not for everyone, right? I may have my favorites and I may say, hey, this accountant is my favorite, but this accountant doesn't work for the type of business that you have.
And
So,
chemistry is chemistry, right? Like
100%, yeah.
I'm stumbling over myself, but honestly, chemistry matters. Are
Yeah.
you interesting to that particular business owner? Can you relate? And while I can relate to a number of businesses across the client base that I work with, I'm not for everybody.
Yeah.
And there are businesses that you just don't get because when you meet, there's no chemistry.
Right. It's
They're not
oil and
interesting.
water, right? Like it's, yeah.
They're not interesting to me, or I'm simply not interesting to them. And if that's the case, that's okay. That doesn't take away from what I do otherwise. It just means that, and I love how you said it, you need a team, you need multiple businesses to pull in so that business owner has choice.
The other thing too is that I don't ever have a business owner coming to me that doesn't already have their own team.
That's
And I'm not interested in replacing their whole team because they may have an amazing financial advisor that works really, really well for them. I want to ask the questions to make sure that that happens, to make sure that that business owner is being taken care of, because again, we don't know what we don't know. And I'm no different, right? But then I also want to meet that financial advisor and I want to know the people that are on that business owner's team. Are you willing to sit down with the other people on the team and have a bigger conversation? And they've run into it where they're like, no, I absolutely don't need to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't have time for that. And it's like, well, it's in your client's best interest. So if, right. And then so it's always up to the client. I mean, gosh, I don't tell them that Lori has to be your benefits provider or, David has to be your accountant. It's, I'm gonna bring these people in. We're gonna have a conversation, hopefully together. I always like that first meeting I like to be involved in that. I don't have to be involved in all the meetings, but I like that introduction meeting. Let me facilitate that a little bit
Yeah.
because I know both of them. And then have that conversation. And then, after, my client might go, yeah, you know what, great, but I just didn't jive with that person. I just don't feel comfortable, especially when you think about the things we're talking about when we're moving into a transaction. Oh my gosh, I think the way you say it is right. You're letting people see under the sheets, man.
Yeah.
Like you have to be vulnerable. That business owner is vulnerable, and they're showing things that they may not feel very proud of showing. So they need to be comfortable with all of these service providers that we're talking about, all of these centers of influence. And when we come back to that, are you worth meeting? Are you worth knowing? You may not be worth knowing to me, but you may be worth knowing to somebody else. So again, everybody is worth knowing and everybody is worth meeting depending on the situation.
Yeah.
So walking into a networking event and just going poof, 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 poof with your business cards saying, I want your clients because I can help them. It's like, well, we're probably going to have a coffee first.
Yeah.
First impressions matter. And if it's like, you just turn me off with the way that you handle that, I probably don't have time to have coffee with you. Right. So I think as advisors, we need to think about that. We need to think about the intention when we're going to a networking event. Be intentional first about the networking event you're going to. Right. I'm not going to go to a networking event that's for Tupperware salespeople. Right. That might be a bad example right now, but right, like, but I'm going to pick and choose the events that I go to that make sense, that where I feel like I can bring value, number one, and number two, where I can meet people that can bring me and my clients value.
Absolutely. It's about relationship building. A good friend of mine, he says that networking, when you belong to a networking group, what you're doing is you're paying for that network. You're paying for those friends. So you
Yeah.
pay to go into it because they've been vetted in some way. And they are people who are trusted people. And so it's a beginning, it's a good starting point. But chemistry again matters, and they're not for everybody. And when we're dealing with that business owner, and as you say, they have to lift up that sheet. I'm only going to lift that sheet up when I trust somebody, when I know that the information I'm going to share with them is going to be taken in a respectful way to move me forward to the next level. I think that's really important to remember.
And I think too, as advisors, when we become that trusted advisor, so it's no different for you. You have clients you've worked with for many years. When it comes time for them to think about exit, you may want to introduce them to, like a value advisor like myself. Um, but it has to be the right fit. And that client has that trusted relationship with you. So who you introduce them to matters,
Yeah.
right? Because they have that trust in you. So if you introduce them to me and I'm all of a sudden like, hey, your baby's like super ugly and your business isn't worth anything. And like, what have you been doing all these years? And I'm rude and I'm not very good to them. That's also a reflection on you.
Yeah.
Right. So they're like, Lori, what the heck? I thought you had my back. So that's the other thing, right? And that's why as advisors, we need to build those relationships to really truly have those centers of influence. It can't be, I got your business card at a networking event a month ago and I have a client that can use your services. We need to understand who we are and, if it's a fit and all of those things, right? Like, and it feels overwhelming, and it feels like, well, gosh, if all you're doing is meeting these people and building these relationships, when are you actually making money?
Yeah.
Right. But again, it's just, it becomes part of
It's the
your
business
marketing plan.
strategy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how how much social media has boomed, right? If we think about when I started in business and to where it is now, word of mouth is still the most powerful ever. So if I look on my social media and how many times people are vomiting on me in a minute
Right.
on how I should be working with them, and they reach out, it doesn't matter what channel it is, they get your name, they see your business, and they just start vomiting on you like that fire hose. And right away you're saying, no, like I'm putting up the wall, I'm blocking all of that information instinctively. Whereas when we do this networking and we're building our centers of influence and we really understand geographically where we work, we understand who we work with best with business owners and our clients, and we're being strategic about those networking events, building those centers of influence. So we're always working in the client's best interest. Then we can pull it all together because there is nothing more powerful than saying, person A, who is my client, I'd really like to have you have a coffee with person B, a center of influence, a trusted advisor, and I'll be there with you. I'm going to facilitate this. If it works for you, great. We're 15 minutes. If it doesn't work for you, you've only lost 15 minutes and I will pay for coffee. That word of mouth can be the difference between the value that they have and being able to scale and create more within their companies.
100%. I've been thinking about it. It's like I've never gotten a client from social media. Right. And I very rarely will even get a tell me more, right? I'll get the other cold call sales calls like, oh, you need our company, like we can do all of these amazing things for you. And it's like, okay, but I know somebody that does what you do, and I'm always going to go to somebody that I know, right? We do business with people we know, like, and trust. Yeah, social media is really great for building credibility, and I think social media is a great place to share knowledge, right? So for me, I'm looking at it, and I've kind of taken a step back from social media because I'm like, really, what is my intention? Because I don't want to be part of the noise. So,
Right.
right. So my intention with social media is going to be about how can I educate people, right? Whether it leads to a conversation or not, if some business owner or some center of influence or even some expert service provider comes across something that I posted that makes them go, oh, I need to think about this, then social media has done its job. But I'm never going to rely on that to get clients. I'm going to rely on building relationships with other advisors, with other referral sources.
I really think of it as a living, breathing resume. It's your CV.
Totally. Yep. Yep.
And I 100% agree with you. We need to be intentional about how we do it. And more times than not, if I've been introduced to somebody, I will reference them to my posts so that they can get to know me a little bit more, my voice, but they'll also see that consistency, right?
Yes.
The consistency of that messaging matters. And that's, in my opinion, where we can use these tools. We
Yes.
can use these tools, but it does not ever replace that word of mouth. And we can argue, you and I are on the same team on that one. We can argue till we're blue in the face to those that will disagree. But in our line of business, in being adding value to business owners, that matters. And it's a really good segue because we're going to have to stop. We're at time. But next time, we're going to talk about actually building that value. We're going to talk about those three legs of the stool. We're going to delve into when you're sitting around the table and you have all of these people and how you're collaborating, putting the owner in the center along with their family to build that value. I want to dive deeply into that, Lisa, and I thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's the time always goes so fast, and it's always great to chat.